Hey everybody, welcome inside the Sit-Down. Ryan Mayer here alongside Dr. Kevin Gilliland, clinical psychologist and executive director of Innovation 360 Treatment Centers. Doc, how are you today?
Good, man. It's good to be here with you guys.
Good to have you here. So just first off, Innovation 360, treatment center down in Dallas and Austin.
Dallas and Austin.
And you treat a variety of different mental health issues there, from addiction to anxiety to depression. So just how did that process all get started of you getting this treatment center started in a way that is maybe different from other addiction centers or treatment centers?
Yeah, you know, it's one of those funny things. Our healthcare system can get kind of rigid. And so we just had an opportunity to step back and go, okay, what do people actually really need when they get back home or if they can't afford to go away? Because that's a lot of people. I've either got a job, or for women that struggle with addictions, the number one reason that they stop treatment is childcare issues. And so you go, okay, how do we flex with people's lives such that we can deliver the same level of care that they need? And that's what we were able to do, and it's been wonderful. And to kind of take treatment outside of the walls of a therapy session. Right. Because we have trouble taking insight and translating that into behavior. And so we do that with staff. It's called life development. And man, it's just been amazing work. Work with some really great young adults. We see a lot of college students. And then a lot of moms and dads. And
that was one of the interesting things in doing some of the research coming into this is emerging adults is a big thing and a big part of a group that you treat at Innovation 360, and that's something that you talked about it on your website, just in terms of not even just moving back home, but also they could be out on their own and still be struggling with that isolation, trying to find that group that they really belong to in life. So just what were you seeing during your time in the practice that really brought you to that area of the field?
Yeah, you know, some things you can see and you go, okay, we need to go there. And then others are like, these keep showing up. What is this? Right. And it's a kind of a past probably 10, 15 years has been a newer phenomenon. I think it's a reflection of a couple of things. One, college is harder to get into and more expensive, which adds pressure for both parties, moms and dads and young adults. And then the world has changed in a really different way in terms of information that's available. We see it when we study across time. Right. We're a more anxious and depressed group of people. And there was a report in the Journal of the American Medical Association last year, women's increase in alcohol use has been shocking. And so you go, all of those tend to go together to mix this sort of really challenging, how do you move forward? It's totally different than when I got out a long time ago, because for some young adults, it's tough to get their footing. And if they've got an over-involved mom and dad, right? Well, they get called helicopter parents, or I love one I just heard, which was curling parents, like the Olympic sport. You know, clean it all away, so they just
sweeping everything up in front. Got it.
I'm like, that's hysterical, both as a sport and an analogy. Right. And so if you've done that for your kid in high school and then in college, and then you're like, all right, you're on your own.
Yeah, it's like no safety net. You're just kind of thrown out into the world.
No skills. Yeah. It's like you took the cast off and my psychological muscles are atrophied. Right. I haven't worked on them. And as we started to see those young adults and parents, you know, parents start helping out financially a little bit just to get your traction. Good idea, but when I'm doing it 3 or 4 years later, it's not working.
You're not necessarily teaching those same life skills.
I'm not helping you transition. Right. And we're not happy about it, and you're not happy about it. How do we get out of this? And it's very hard for parents to know how to get out of it. And so we do see quite a bit of that.
Now, what's the best way that you found in terms of helping these young men and women transition to that adulthood in an area where, you said it, there's a lot of helicoptering, curling parents, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, because, you know, social media is a little bit like reading your kid's diary. I'm like, man, do not read that if you're not willing to talk. Because then you're going to try to hang on to that information and not have it affect you. It's going to affect you. You're going to seem very bizarre to your kid. You're like, why do you keep asking me these weird questions? Well, because I'm trying to get close so that you'll spit the the secret out. Like, they're not going to do
Trying to work your way into the conversation through a side door rather than just coming at it straight
on. Your kids are smart. They're like, I know what you're doing. I'm not doing it. So are you going to say? I'm not saying. And you go, okay, eventually the parent's going to say. Because their worry and fear gets overwhelming. So part of what we talk about is we got to work with mom and dad to go, listen, everybody started this with good intentions. it's not working, we got to do something different. No, don't cut them off to zero. Again, they need to build up the psychological social muscles. So let's talk about a plan that steps them down so that you're never supporting them. Because what you don't want to do is go to zero, they flounder for a month or two, now you go back up to supporting them. That's not
it's
the
a roller
lesson.
coaster.
Yeah,
that
you don't want to do that.
Get trapped
you
in.
want to ease down, both financially, psychologically, socially. You want to get them plugged in with their peers.
And you mentioned social media, and it's something I know we were talking about before off camera. It's a great opportunity in many ways, but also on the flip side, we do see kind of a little bit of an increase, especially in younger age kids that are coming up in this era, of anxiety, of depression, of mental health issues. Where do you find that line where it's good, but there's also a lot of bad too with social media?
Here's I hate the answer. I think it's accurate. We don't know for sure research-wise. We're trying to study it, but it's really hard to study. It's a little bit like alcohol or smoking or food. Especially if you were in college and had roommates, or you're finished with college, have roommates, you're like, why can my roommate eat like that? I can't. We have the same workout routine, but if I eat a whole pizza like he eats a whole pizza, I gain weight like that. So we have to start to realize I can't do that.
It's person by person.
Yes, it has a negative effect on me. We don't think like we need to think, not even as adults, as young adults, which is a much more difficult time, of what's the effect this is having on me? You know, that after I look at social media, do I just take literally 15 seconds and go, how long was I doing that? Was that a good use of my time? Was I avoiding doing something else? And two, how do I feel? Do I feel better than when I started looking, or do I feel worse? And we don't look at that. Just like we count calories really well. Everybody has a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or a Garmin. I know how many steps I've taken. You're like, okay, well, that is kind of good. We have to start thinking that way about
social media.
Consumption of information. I love social media. I love what the internet can provide. We do better when we go out to look for something specific, like how to find a job, or sights to see in a city, or history, or, I mean, there's lots of things that we can find out there that are really amazing. But we have to be thoughtful about what we do. And what we end up doing is looking at social media like we watch TV. We'll watch horrible shows on TV and just till no end. But you're like, no, you've got to be more thoughtful. Change the channel. Get to something else.
Flip to something that is going to make you feel good, as opposed to just scrolling through, comparing yourself to others. Everything, I forget who said it, but it seems like everybody's putting the A side, if you go back to the old the old CDs and cassette tapes, the A side versus the B side of their existence.
Thank you for acting like I wouldn't know.
No. I'm saying it for anybody out there that is, younger than the two of us. That may not know what a cassette tape is and may not have had that experience of a Walkman over time.
We do. We have to start thinking a lot more actively about what are we consuming. And I think we've made a lot of strides in our physical activity and nutrition because we're far more thoughtful about it. But it's staying disciplined to it that's the real challenge.
We're not on that same level when it comes to mental health. And it's gotten better in recent years. Particularly, you see a lot of these athletes, a lot of celebrities come out and discuss their mental health struggles. Off the top of my head, Kevin Love this past year with the Cleveland Cavaliers.
And Dwayne Wade just recently talked about, they're asking him, I can't remember who it was, they're asking him what's he going to do, and he's talking, he said, I'm going to go see a therapist. I think they kind of laughed, and he was like, no, I'm serious. This has been my life for the majority of my life. This is a massive change. I'm like, man, I love, one, how he talked about it, and just going, no, it's not that big a deal. Anybody making a big change, hey, go talk to somebody to coach you through this. That's all you're doing.
To help you deal with those feelings and figure out exactly how you're feeling about the situation and make the next best step for you. So for you, you've been a clinical psychologist now for a very long time. How did you get interested in this area of study? That's something that's always interesting to me because everybody has their passion. Why was it? Why was that the passion for you?
Yeah, it started innocently enough. You know, that discussion again back when I went to school. They're like, "Hey, what do you want to major in?" I'm like, "College." You know, I'm like, "Yes,
right.
I'm really interested in that.
Get that degree.
Sports,
maybe
and girls,
right.
and
right.
Are you talking about after that?" And so I was like, I like people. I've always enjoyed people and relationships. So I ended up down the path of psychology. Got to grad school and was fascinated by it, both from the clinical piece, but also from the business piece. And then finishing up and starting to do some research in the field, that's, I think, how I navigated to some of those spaces that I've really enjoyed. Whether it was sort of those big three, if you will, mood and anxiety and substances.
Sure.
And then I've just had a chance to work with a number of really wonderful, successful men and women, whether that's CEOs or athletes or entertainers. And you go, you know what, it doesn't matter what you do and how you've done it. We all have struggles we try to navigate.
Sure.
We tend to think there's two groups of people, me and then the rest of the world that seems to be doing fine.
Right.
And that's just not the case.
Yep.
If anything, it's harder for those people to find a sympathetic ear, because we look in a real shallow way of, and we do this to our friends at times, like, what have you got to be down about?
No, absolutely.
You're like, I don't know, but
and
I
it goes back to those social media feeds, right? You're seeing those big life events that make everybody happy, and you're not seeing those days where they're just sitting there going, I don't really want to get out of bed this morning. Like, I just want to kind of chill here, watch Netflix, maybe order
do that
in.
Well. Yeah, and so it's social media is a little bit. I heard somebody one time say, you know, movies are life with the boring parts cut out. And that's kind of what social media is. You're like, all the boring
perfect.
And bad parts are cut out.
Absolutely.
And the people that do share and post it, I'm always drawn to how they do it well. Not that their struggles become their identity, but it's, hey, yeah, I'm just going through this.
Right.
Yeah, that's how we should think about it as, no, I'm just going through a difficult chapter because I've got this going on or that going on, or I have no idea why. I'm trying to figure it out. Okay, well, I'm trying to step in to do some of these things that kind of help me get some traction and move forward.
Now, over your time within the field, are there any mental health issues or illnesses that you've seen on the rise a little bit that maybe surprised you over time?
I think the anxiety has been real interesting to watch as a culture, probably the past 10 or 15 years, to see it increase like it has. And then even in the past 5 to 10 years, to see our rates of depression going up, that's really surprising. I think this past 10 years has been most surprising. I don't know that just because that coincides with social media doesn't mean it caused it.
There's not correlation versus causation. Yes.
Yeah, but boy, that sure is fascinating that they've kind of circled together. And it's an interesting time for both the parents as well as if you've got young adults and even the millennials. It's interesting. I work with this company, Catapult Health, and they do some screenings at on-site employees.
Sure.
So these are all working people, and they were screening for depression and suicidal thought across all age groups. And the highest with depression were the millennials, and the highest with current suicidal thinking were millennials.
Okay.
And you just go, wow, that's kind of surprising. And those numbers do seem like they're increasing. It's not just, yeah, that's our opinion. When you start to look at the data is tracking in that direction as well.
Now, what do you think is behind that? Obviously, we covered the social media a little bit, and that's not necessarily a cause, but what do you think may be part of the underlying causes there? Is it just straight unhappiness with their field of work, or how much they have to work in this sort of gig economy? What do you think it is?
Those are all very good questions. Bottom line, we don't know.
Right.
But of all the guesses, social media is one of them. A busyness. There seems to be a busyness that has changed over the past, I'd say probably 20 years. It's gotten very different, even in sports and athletics.
Yeah.
With the select teams and the individual sessions.
Specialization.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I was coaching one of my sons, I can't remember what it was, baseball, or I think it was a baseball team, and had one of the other players, his dad was a current Dallas Cowboy. Great guy, incredible guy. And we were playing this other team one time, and I mean, they look like a minor league team. These are 8-year-olds.
Right.
And I was like, holy
well
cow.
drilled out there on the field, turning double plays.
They looked amazing.
Right.
And he turned to me at one point and was like, man, I didn't even play baseball until I was I was like, really?
Right.
He goes, yeah, we didn't have all of this nonsense. Because it's kind of, you're like, what are you doing?
Right.
And we have all of this busy schedule that we don't even have time to breathe, either as parents or even as kids. And so it's, how do we do with that downtime? And being comfortable with our own skin and our own downtime, I joke about I was a free range kid. Because I was like, no, man, we're just like, be home at dark.
Right.
Well, that's a different kind of exploring.
Let you outside, you go, you're running, swinging around.
You're free range, man, all over the neighborhood. Just you got to be back at dark.
Exactly.
You're like, all right, that seems easy enough. Don't even need a watch.
Right.
Didn't have a cell phone.
Right.
And so we see now, so there's a real busy schedule. There's actually, oddly enough, seems to be a little bit more isolation in spite of all the social media, because it can feel like you're connected, but you're not connected in a way that's a meaningful relationship.
Sure.
It's kind of a shadow of what real relationships are like. I talk about the analogy of pornography versus sex with somebody that you care about and love.
Right.
It's a shadow of what the real thing
actually is.
And it's the same thing with social media. You can end up feeling like you're connected, but you don't get the joy and the meaning and the growth from being in real relationships. And so we think that may be a piece of it as well. I don't know that we're seeing substances increase all that much. They seem to be tracking at about the same rate, except for you've got a couple of groups.
Sure.
Now we're adding marijuana to the mix. But,
of course.
So I think those seem to be some of the things that we're looking at that may account for some of the change.
And it's interesting in that respect, because it all kind of ties back to what you were talking about before with that busyness. It's a lot of pressure from the parents, from the kids that are feeling in terms of getting into college, achieving better than what your parents did before you, which has always been part of the American fabric, right? It's always been that I want my kids to do better than I did, but at the same time trying to find that balance and that fine line of pushing them, but not
you absolutely hit it. And
hitting them too hard.
Without us knowing it, the hill got steeper.
Right.
Because it's harder to get in. And so, you look at this scandal that's going on right now with these people that paid to get their kids into college. That is 100% about parental anxiety and worry and fear. You just go, no, that has nothing to do with these kids.
Right.
That's a reflection of those parents trying to manage the stress and anxiety of getting into college, because it's
to make it easier on the
so
kid.
much harder. Yeah, to make it easier. And I'm like, well, what do you think would happen if they don't get into this college?
Right.
I mean, if they're really going to fall apart, we need to invest those dollars in some mental health treatment.
Sure.
Because the world is about not getting what you want all the time, and that's not always a bad thing.
Right.
They even make songs like that. So you go, why?
Make a lot of songs
make
like
a lot
that.
of songs. Yeah. So you go, wow, what did you people? That was your best idea.
Yeah.
To deal with your anxiety was to do that, and you go, it is a reflection of that. We see a lot of that dynamic of the young adults feeling that pressure from mom and dad.
Right.
Because 20 years ago, you don't do well in a semester, and it's expensive and it's inconvenient.
Sure.
But now, it's a small home loan.
Right.
I mean, it can be astronomical for people.
Right.
So that's definitely has been a part of the mix.
And that pressure at times can also almost dig you into a deeper hole, right? Because you're continually trying and you're stuck in that same place. The wheels are spinning out.
Yeah.
And you're just kicking up a whole bunch of dirt behind you. There's not necessarily getting over that hump. And it's interesting in that respect. I don't know how much you follow baseball, but there's currently a guy, Chris Davis, for the Baltimore Orioles.
Yeah.
Longest consecutive hitless streak in Major League Baseball history. I'm curious from your perspective, just what do you think he is going through how does he deal with this?
Yeah.
Because this is something that, I mean, fans are going to consistently be on him. He has to feel horrible about the situation, and there's no one more frustrated than him, but he can't seem to figure it out.
Oh, man. You know what it does is it highlights the really extraordinary piece of professional athletes, collegiate athletes. I was talking to a physician that works with one of our Olympic sports, the Winter Olympics, and I was like, hey, I mean, really, what's the difference between hacks like me and Olympians? And he was like, look, you got to have a genetic anomaly, right? You either got really good lungs or you're 6'8".
Right.
And you are in a different class mentally. And it's that mental ability to keep those thoughts out and just focus on the task at hand that professional athletes and even entertainers have to face. And what's fascinating is we see other areas, like you'll see special forces men that have to do it. I don't know if you saw the Red Bull, that guy, Felix Baumgartner.
Yes.
Okay, see, he started having massive panic attacks. This guy's the world-class high jumper.
Yes.
And they fit all this specifically to him, but when he got in that suit, in that capsule, he started having panic attacks.
Right.
He'd never had them in his life. And they're like, hey, dude, we got a lot invested in you.
Right.
This is all built for you.
Right. There's nobody else that can do this.
We're going to have to look for another 5'9", 160-pound guy that's, and you're like, we can't. So they got him with a psychologist that just helped him learn how to manage his mind and his thoughts.
Sure.
And if you do that, you can actually control your body. And sometimes your body, through breathing, can control what your mind is doing to keep those things out, because you're never going to be successful if you allow all those negative thoughts to stick. And what we see from him, the Hitler streak, is you have got to hyper-focus and keep all those other things out, and you're going to be fine. You got to the major leagues for a reason. It's easier for us to say this.
Well,
we don't have how many thousands of people.
Exactly. We don't have people raining down booze on us in the studio right now, at least hopefully not.
Yeah, hopefully not. Maybe outside, but we can't hear them.
Exactly.
But no, it's that hyper-focusing and breaking it down into small pieces. And that's all that's on my list, is this, and this. Now, in our own lives, we all have to do the same thing. We have these really mixed up ideas about what mental health is, or about, I need to go to counseling. Well, no, maybe you actually need to be more thoughtful about what's your mind doing.
Sure.
And we spend all this time getting coaches to be good at our jobs and what we do, and going to college, but you're like, hey, how does your mind work?
Right.
How does your body function best? What kind of food? How much sleep? And when your mind is working against you, there are absolutely some little things you can start to do to focus that in, and to just switch it.
And that's one of the interesting things I found also about what you are doing with Innovation 360 and with various treatment programs that you're providing, is you realize that there are certain people that have really active minds. Their thoughts race from day to day and topic to topic during the course of the day, and then there's others that are just able to let things pass and just continue to move on through the course of the day. So it does kind of all circle back to that case-by-case person basis to a certain extent.
It is. And it's, okay, so how do I step in if, that's not my problem? Okay, what's I struggle with this. Okay, we all struggle. I think one of our biggest challenges, and I don't think we do that good of a job really parenting and talking about that with our kids, or even proactively thinking about it, is, okay, what's the best environment for me to be successful in? You talk about baseball, or even football, you go, okay, not against this team, we're not doing that. Even though we're great at it, we're not doing that. Or we're going to do it less. Or we're not using this guy.
Sure.
We do it in a lot of other places in life. Or if you're in a business that you're pitching to a certain client, you're like, nope, this guy, this is what he doesn't like these things. You go, how do I start to do that with myself, to go, all right, when do I really excel? And if I've got a lot going on, I have to do a better job of managing these things. And I think there's never been a more important time for us to do that than now, because we have so much information coming at us.
Yeah, and we can absolutely, as you said, figure out what other people may need, or what other people may like, or you're able to, if in the case of sports, you're able to break things down to a very analytical level. This guy doesn't like to shoot from this area of the court. This guy doesn't like this pitch on the outside corner. When we look at ourselves, we're just kind of like, well, I'm okay, I guess. Or there's some people that obviously have that higher ability to analyze themselves a little bit, but for the most part, you're just kind of looking at it and going, well, okay. I don't really know.
It's funny. So when you listen to people like that and you go, hey, so what about for you? You're like, how do I? You're like, it's more challenging for us. But most of us want to get better at what we're doing. We want to be better either at work. We want to be better as partners or husbands or fathers or friends. You go, okay, well, do you put the time into thinking about what are you good at? What are the environments you struggle in? What's something you need to get better at? And that's your mental health. And what's I think is wonderful is when you think broadly about your mental health and you start looking at the foods you eat, you start looking at your sleep. Are you sleep depriving yourself? Because nothing can fix that. And then what about your consumption of alcohol or pot or pain? You go, okay, what am I doing and why? Because if I can influence those areas and I'm physically active, that's good for my mental health. Because when my mental health suffers, I'm more vulnerable to get sick. I'm more vulnerable to get some illnesses that now I have to manage. Blue Cross Blue Shield did a huge study last year. I keep talking about it because it's fascinating. Because they had 40 million members.
Okay.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah. Huge sample size.
Huge sample. And so you go, okay, and these are working people. These are people at the office. I guess they're family members too. And you go, wow, what we've seen in the past 5 years is an alarming increase of depression. And you go, golly, we have got to, there's so many wake-up calls for us, whether it's seeing our kids struggle in this environment or us continuing to increase with, hey, okay, is my sleep starting to be a problem? Is my concentration, is my energy level down? Am I worrying so much about work I can't fall asleep? And you go, okay, that's a problem. I'll think about medicine at some point. I'm not opposed to that. But what are you thinking about the other things? If you know what, I keep saying yes to too many things. And we always say yes to good things.
Right.
And so you go, okay, I'm gonna have to say no to something that's really good.
Right.
Because I want to do these great things over here. And it's being active like that. And if you were in college or you played sports in high school, you had to do that.
Right.
You couldn't do all this.
You had to
and do this.
Segment your time
you had
and figure
to learn,
it
like,
out.
Dang it, man! Y'all are going where now? I've got to get this paper done.
Right. Or I got lifting in the morning.
Or
I gotta get up. I gotta be in the gym. There's no way
that.
I can. Right.
Or drinking that.
Exactly.
I'm not doing
exactly.
It.
I can't be out to all hours of the night with you guys
Did not go
because
well last time.
I got to be up this early, and last time, well, it ended with me in a trash can. You know, that sort of thing.
Not doing that at the office.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and going back to the anxiety point with seeing kind of that rise.
Yeah.
I'm curious because there were a lot of stories coming out around the last election, right, in 2016, about an uptick in anxiety, in mental health visits, in therapy appointments. Do you think, now that we're getting towards 2020, is that something that you think we continue to see, or is that something that was kind of maybe a little bit overblown in terms of stories?
No, it's actually, that's one of those stories that was kind of spot on. I had one or two clients that I saw as a direct result of it, and talked to quite a few people that have been significantly disrupted by that. And I'm like, that's really fascinating.
Right.
So if it's that disruptive to you, why do you keep going out to read all of that?
Sure.
I mean, you're not going to get a chance to do anything for 4 years, maybe in 2 years.
Right.
But if you're politically active in all these other ways, then okay, it makes sense. But if your idea of being politically active is following stories about whoever your party is,
right, and commenting on those stories,
or commenting on them, well, your feed is going to start to have those stories because it's part of what all the social media and Google are. Oh, hey, you like these?
Right.
We'll send you more.
That filter bubble.
Yeah, and you go. It's like I joked with somebody the other day about this issue. I'm like, I had to buy some new running shoes, and I bought them. And I'm like, I was tempted to call Nike and go, hey, I have the shoes. Stop with the
sending
ads. I don't need any more stories.
I don't need to see any more.
I own them. I mean, I'll
right.
take a photo and post them on your Instagram. So like, I have them.
Right.
Stop hounding me.
Right.
But that's the funny example. But when you keep getting fed all of these stories about politics, and again, you step back and go, man, that just works me up. Why don't you stop being worked up about it? Why don't you take a more active role with your family and friends and stop talking about it? I mean, you don't work in the political arena. You're not a lobbyist. There's really nothing you can do about this. How about you just step back and be curious? If you're going to do anything at all, step back and be curious about, wow, what did I miss?
Right.
And what seems to be going on that I'm clueless about?
Right.
Because what we end up doing is seeking news that just supports our own opinion.
Right.
And that has been incredibly divisive for us as a country. I don't see us dealing well with it. I think part of the challenge is you have most news outlets are kind of oriented towards particular parties.
Sure.
Both parties. And so you go, wow, I just see more fanning of the flames, and I think it's actually going to be just as bad, if not a little bit worse, than the next election, because we don't seem to have learned from this last lesson. You know, I said to somebody, I've never seen, and I'm down in Texas, traditionally, you know, Republican country. But I've got friends that are Democrats, friends that are Republican. I dislike all politics.
Understandable.
Yeah, it's just, but you go, wow, I've never seen both parties so close. I never really heard anybody so excited about this candidate or so excited about this. What I always heard was, well, they're better than them.
Right.
I'm like, well, that's a horrible statement. I mean, it's embarrassing.
Right.
Like, I was outside of the country shortly after the election, and people were like, oh, you know, and I'm like, look, it's an embarrassing, I'm not proud of either of the individuals that we put forward. And so how do we monitor what our mind and our hearts are doing, that we step back from that issue?
And again, circling back, how do you make it positive for yourself? Rather than just continuing to reinforce that opinion, maybe you find a way to be active in a light that makes you feel good as opposed to just reading these things.
If you want to do something about it because you're so bothered, then go do something. But, you know, we count our calories, we count our steps, count your social media, and count how many political stories are you reading. Because if you want to be a fearful parent, now's a horrible time. Because you used to have to worry about the school your kids went to. Now you can see what happened to kids in school in Britain or in Scotland or anywhere in the country. And you go, okay, if you're feeding your anxiety and worry, you need to stop. But it's hard for us as humans to stop. It's very hard until we keep doing it to where something breaks, whether it's our marriage or our health. Like, we don't need to do that. If we start to count and monitor, and now iPhone on one of the recent versions, I think other phones are doing as well.
Yeah, the screen time.
Screen time, which I love.
A breakdown of how you spent your day on your phone.
It's fantastic. So you know it's going to start to affect people. And this isn't just young adults. Like, you know, not many of you guys drive up here, subway and walk. But back home, like, they're having to pass laws in other states that are like, hey, you can't drive.
It's not a good idea to drive and tweet.
Or watch videos. Y'all are grown adults doing this. We're just, I mean, that should be another one of those wake-up calls of, man, what am I managing? I mean, I'm not eating this because it has gluten. That's kind of a nuanced deal. You're not allergic to it. You're just trying to fine-tune your body. How about fine-tuning your mind?
Well, and to that point, in terms of the screen time, it is almost like a calorie count on a menu, right? When prior to calorie counts being introduced on menus, there was a lot more of an issue in terms of, well, why can't I get more healthy? Why can I not continue to follow these diet plans that I'm on? Now you have these calorie counts, as you mentioned. We're aware of the macros. We're aware of all of these sorts of things, and things are slowly maybe getting a little bit better.
Hopefully we're trending right.
Now, screen time, hopefully the same thing happens in terms of social media.
I really
use.
do. I think it's fantastic. If nothing else, there's going to be enough people that start to look at that and go, dadgum, man, how many hours did I spend? Okay. That may be why I'm not sleeping as much. That may be why I'm not as healthy as I was, and it may be why I haven't gotten to this and this. And you know what? I'm going to start to, do I really want to do that? You know, is that really on my top 10 list of things I wanted to get done this weekend? Yeah, it's huge. It's such a weird time for us. The technology shift in 10 years has been, it's been seismic. It really has. And these millennials are the first group that grew up plugged in, and we're that first batch of parents
trying to figure out how to navigate
that.
Absolutely.
And so I think we'll get better, but we're still in the process of course correcting.
Finally, we've talked a ton about other people and how they can move forward and help themselves in their lives. For you, as you look forward with Innovation 360 and with all of the projects that you're working on, what's in the future for you?
You know, we love a couple of groups we love. We love that young adult crowd. We've had a real heart for helping people learning to manage their mood, whether it's I have a full-blown mood disorder or I'm just angry and irritable all the time, or whether it's, hey, how do I manage my consumption of alcohol, and when pot becomes legal, how do I manage that well? We just love working with families, and especially young adults and families with young adults. We've got to do a better job of, especially in mental health care, of making some adjustments that make it easier for people to access the services that they need. Because you don't need to go see somebody for the rest of your life. You may not even see somebody for 10 visits. But how do we start to shift to where we can provide those services either electronically or through video chats or those different forms.
Using technology to make it better.
Healthcare is one of those that's really been slow, but we've been stepping into some of those pieces of how do we provide the right kind of resources that fit with really busy and really plugged in schedules.
Well, Dr. Kevin Gilliland, thanks so much for the time. Appreciate it. Why don't you tell the people where they can find all the information on Innovation 360.
You can catch us at i360dallas.com. We're also on Facebook, Innovation 360, and they can follow me at Dr. Kevin G.
Yep.
There you go.
All right, there it is. Dr. Kevin Gilliland, again, 20 years in the clinical psychology field, as well as the executive director of Innovation 360. Thanks for coming by again.
It's been good.
We'll see you next time here on the Sit Down.